Good evening and welcome. Turn in your songs of faith and praise to number 859. When all of God's singers get home, 859. And number 867. To Canaan's land I'm on my way. 867.
Darkest night will turn to day when Well, welcome out everyone this evening. I don't know if it was just me, but it seemed like the singing was exceptionally good, so whatever that's worth. This evening, Merle is going to be giving a talk on technology, AI, so whatever he has prepared for us on that. Before we give the time to him, is there any announcements that need to be made? If not, then let's stand for a word of prayer, and I'll give the time over to him. Our Father in heaven, we bow before you tonight. We thank you for your word, and help us, Lord, tonight as Merle speaks, give him wisdom, and help us, Lord, to understand the technology that we have and to be able to use it in a good way. And be with us this evening as we fellowship and depart from here, that you would be with us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I'll turn the time over to Merle.
Well, good evening and a welcome to each one of you tonight. Glad you joined us for this evening. And several months ago, Brother Elmer approached me about giving a talk on artificial intelligence, and he wondered if I would be willing to do that for the church. And first I was like, well, I'm not sure what I would say or what you have in mind. The more I thought about it, the more I said, well, maybe it would be good to bring some clarity to the issue, because it's something that is only going to become more and more prevalent in our lives. And just up front, I will make a few disclaimers. The one is that I don't feel I am all that qualified to talk about this subject. There's probably people here in the audience that are more qualified than I am on this issue, and I've tried to do my best in getting something together to bring to you tonight to give you an idea of what we're going to be looking at and how it might affect your life moving forward, how it might affect our lives, and what we need to guard against. At the end of the talk, I will be opening it up for some questions. So if there is something that I say or something that you've been wondering about, I will do my best to answer that. But again, it's something that if I say some stuff doesn't quite sound right, come and talk to me about it, or bring it up in the questions time. And also, I'm going to do my best to give you what I know about artificial intelligence and not to tell you how you should think about it. There will be a few times where I will maybe make some more pointed comments, and I'll try to say, now this is my opinion. So I don't necessarily speak for the church leadership on this issue or the direction I think the church should go on this. It's more just my personal opinions. I think it's something that we should maybe have that conversation with going forward. But up to this point, it's something that's been so new and scary sounding, really. What is artificial intelligence, that we've just tried to shy away from it. But as you'll probably learn tonight, it's coming into our lives whether we want it to or not. That doesn't mean we shouldn't put up guardrails to try to protect against it, but we cannot entirely box it out of our lives without boxing out internet, and even in the future probably cars, if it may eventually get to something like that. And with a big infrastructure project happening just down the road from us, we're going to see more and more effects of that in our community. So, to start, I thought I'd start with a story, because I enjoy telling stories. It's one of the things that I like to do. I like to wrap in my talks. This story, over 100 years old. So what does that have to do with artificial intelligence? And hopefully you'll be able to follow along with me, because it was in the late 1800s that a man named Charles ended up in New York City, or it was Boston. I think it was New York City, as an Italian immigrant who had come to make his mark on the world. And he had planned that he would become rich, become famous. And through a few failed ventures, he finally ended up in Montreal, Canada, where he was working for an Italian banker. And this Italian banker was a cunning man. He had figured out how to get customers that he otherwise couldn't have. It was a small bank, and at that time, most of the banks were offering a 2% interest. And what they would do is they would buy a Italian bond, because it was an Italian bank. They'd buy Italian securities with 3% interest rate, and then they would pocket the 1%, and they would give the 2% to the person holding their money in their bank. And this banker figured, well, if I would give them 3%, that would be giving them everything. But to make it even more appealing, I'm going to offer them a 6% interest. And now if you're doing the math in your head, you're like, well, what's eventually going to happen? There's not going to be enough of money to pay for everybody's money in the bank. Well, he kicked that ball down the road, and so Charles was working for him. He was working in a teller. And eventually the bill came due, or the money was clearly going to run out. And so the banker absconded with a bunch of the money and left Charles to fall on the sword. And he ended up spending some time in prison for a crime he really wasn't aware he was committing. Several years later, and after getting out of prison, he found himself in Alabama. And while he was in Alabama, he was working in a mining town, and he discovered there was a need for utilities in this town. There was these miners needed electricity, they needed water, and so he began to put together plans to put a utility company in place to bring utilities into these mines. But just before it went public, there was a lady who was burned very badly in an accident in that town, and she needed a skin graft. And so Charles went to the doctor and said, how much skin does she need? And he said, well, quite a lot, actually. She needs, I think it was 200 square inches. Charles said, well, she can have mine. And so most of that skin came from his back and his legs, and it put him in the hospital for 4 to 5 months as he fought infections. It was a very painful ordeal. But he would eventually recover. But during that time, somebody else stole his idea, started the utility company, and suddenly he was without his grand plan. So on to Boston he went, and he arrived in Boston in 1920, just as the Roaring '20s were beginning to roar, just as for the first time in American history, more people lived in the cities than in the towns. And one of the things that was happening in American society then was this drive to get rich. And everybody wanted to make their mark on the world and to get wealthy in a fast and easy way. And it was while he was there that Charles discovered an arbitrage in the market with postage stamps. And an arbitrage is basically when you can make an investment that is almost zero risk or extremely low risk for a near guaranteed profit. And this was after World War I, and they didn't have things like a currency exchange station. So what they would do is you could get a postage coupon in one country, take that coupon to another country, and redeem that first stamp. And as he was looking through he seemed to be a very astute man. He figured out that he could buy a stamp in Italy or in Spain, bring that coupon to America, turn it into a stamp, sell the stamp for a very healthy profit because of the inflation at that time. The only problem was it cost a lot of money to travel to Europe to buy these coupons and to travel back. And so he thought, well, if he can get some investors on board with this, it would be worth it and everybody would make money. He pitched the idea to a few banks. Nobody seemed interested, and so he started his own company called the Security Exchange Company, the SEC, which is maybe a little bit humorous to those of you who know what the Security Exchange Commission is, which was founded several years later. But he pitched this idea to individuals and said, look, I can give you a 50% interest in 45 days, or I can double your money in 90 days. He was that confident in his scheme. A few tepid investors bought in, and after they got their money when the period came due, the whole thing began to blow up. And he had investors out the door, and in a very short time, he had the whole city of Boston clamoring to bring him money. Unfortunately, through all of this, he got so caught up with his scheme that he never was even able to make the trip to Europe to buy the coupons. And so he was doing this money passing around business, robbing Peter to pay Paul, as it was called in those days. When it was all over, it was actually a relatively short time. He only operated for a little under 11 months. But when it was all over, he would cause 3 banks in Boston to fail and thousands of people to lose their life savings. His name was Charles Ponzi. Perhaps you recognize the last name. He was the most famous, many believe, the most famous fraudster in history. And his name lives in infamy. The robbing Peter to pay Paul scheme is no longer called that. It's called the Ponzi scheme. It was named after him. And the reason I say this story is because I want us to understand a little bit of who he was as a person. Historians still, to this day, have a difficulty understanding who he was because he was not like other fraudsters, other conmen. He was a very generous and very kind man. He wasn't the type of person who was trying to con you, as it was, and he seemed to have, unlike most scammers, fully believed in his scam because he was, at one point, one of, if not the richest man in Boston. He could have easily taken his money and gone to Italy, who did not have an extradition treaty with the United States. He would have been fine living with his mother in Italy with his millions of dollars. And yet he never did. He always believed what he was doing was going to work. And so therein lies the dichotomy. It's like, well, was he a bad person or wasn't he? But what we do know is he caused a massive scam for many people. Many people lost everything because of it. What does that story have to do with AI? So fast forward 120 years, 110 years to where we are today. I wanted to tell that story because I wanted to bring out a point before we get too deep into this. Artificial intelligence is going to offer us an enormous amount of opportunity to get rich or to lose everything we have. There's going to be, and there already are, I'm hesitating to use the word scammer. There are opportunities, investment opportunities, where people are saying, look, we're using AI to find arbitrages in the stock market or to find inefficiencies in things. You invest your money, I can get you a much better return than the banks can. Are they right? Maybe. Are they wrong? We'll see. I say that because, and to be clear, I am not giving financial advice. I'm not authorized to give financial advice, and so this is not financial advice. It's more of a caution. Do your due diligence. What I'm afraid is going to happen is there's going to be some, say, either Amish or Mennonite person, maybe someone who's left their circles, but we know their Freundschaft quite well, and they're going to offer an opportunity for us to buy into some for AI scheme that's going to make us a lot of money. And we are very, as a people, we're very trustworthy, and I think that's for the most part a good thing, especially when it comes to people that we know and trust, and we know their Freundschaft. They know what they're doing. They might not know what they're doing, and I want to, before I begin, caution, do your due diligence when it comes to this sort of thing. Many years ago, this was in 2016 or 17 probably, there was a very good friend of mine who pitched an idea to me of how I could make some money. There was a new form of money called cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin. And he said, you could buy Bitcoin now for $90 a piece, and it would make you a lot of money in 10 years. And I went home, and I did a little bit of research on it, and I said, I don't understand what this is. This doesn't make sense to me how this can be worth this kind of money. And so I did not invest in it. Had I bought $1,000 of Bitcoin when they were $90 a piece, I'd be a millionaire today. And so do I regret that? Well, I should have probably taken his advice. But at the same time, there was a principle there that I want to highlight, and that was the principle of I did not understand this. I decided not to buy into it. And I want to try to impart some of that with you tonight. Probably what would have happened is if I would have bought into it and I would have made all this money, I would have bought into many other schemes and probably lost all that up to this point. Just because it worked one time when it shouldn't have, and so why wouldn't it keep working? We as humans tend to get what's called FOMO. I don't know if you ever heard of that. It's FOMO, the fear of missing out. You know, I have a good friend who has FOMO when he goes to a restaurant with other people because he's so afraid that somebody else is going to order a plate that's better than him. And so he just hates it when he gets there to a restaurant. He's like, well, what if this guy's food is better than my food? So let's not get FOMO when we're pitched these ideas, how to make a bunch of money. So what is artificial intelligence? Well, it's not all that intelligent in and of itself. So it's mostly trained off of the internet, or they've actually gone past just the internet anymore, and they're scanning millions of books, old newspaper articles, just any kind of information that was ever written, putting it into one big database, and then AI searches through that. And so if you have a question, you can go on to like ChatGPT, Grok, Claude. There's a lot of different websites that use this, and you can say, I don't know what questions you have in life, but you know, whatever your question might be, and it will scan all of the pages that are relevant and try to get back to you with an answer that's very condensed. And I found it to be very helpful in a lot of cases. Instead of, if I want to know about a certain product or know about a certain event, instead of Google searching it and a bunch of different pages come up and I have to go through the pages and read, AI can usually summarize that very quickly. It's easy to find out. And most of the good ones will have a link to, then you can click on a website that will explain it further if you'd like to. The other thing it can do, and so that's just a little bit of what it does. The way it's trained, it basically searches they have what they call crawlers, I think is some creepers or crawlers, that search every public website in existence to try to pull information off. And then it's stored in a big database. So even, I had Alfredo write some articles for our church on our website. I'm guessing it went through there, and so maybe if you ask Anabaptist theology or something, some of that would pop up. So it's possible things that you wrote on the internet maybe were used in the training of that model. Now, so that's what we have now. It's fairly narrow. It's mostly based off of known knowledge. So, for instance, let's say that you ask it a question about an event that happened. It will go through every newspaper clipping, every website article, and it'll try to put together a summary of what that is. AGI is what they're working towards. This is artificial general intelligence, and this is something that they believe depends who you listen to, they believe they can reach it. Some people are a lot more optimistic than others. Some people say we're only several years away from this. Some people say it's never going to happen. I tend to believe with the latter, and I'll explain it a little bit more. Artificial general intelligence, or AGI, is more of an actual intelligent being, where it could come up with, let's say, a recipe from scratch. So right now, if you go onto Grok and say, listen, I have chicken, I have rice, I have these seasonings, what would be a good supper to make? It will maybe pull a curry recipe, or maybe pull a recipe of ricotta chicken or something. It pulls something in that's already exists. But AGI could say, well, if you put these seasonings together in this way, you could create this, and so you'd have AI chicken for supper tonight. That doesn't exist. They think it will. And a lot of their calculations about how big industry is going to get in the next couple of years are based on that becoming a reality. So another example would be, and I'm going to pick on Miller's a little bit here, because you can already buy robots that could make sandwiches, and you can program these robots to make them, but they're not very good at it. But if you had AGI, you could tell them they would operate just like humans, is where they're hoping this would go. So, you know, Anita and Steve, they could just let the robots go the whole day. They would be there making sandwiches, taking orders. There would be a robot that would be ordering out ahead, and, you know, even taking care of customers. And then, the robot would say next week is July 4th weekend. There's probably going to be a lot of rolls and bread, and I don't know if it's get more busy over holidays, but we're going to make extra stuff. So this is where some people in the industry see this going. I have serious questions about whether that's possible. I don't think it is. I think that intelligent life is made by God alone. I don't think that us as humans have that capability. And even the most optimistic expectations of that, they will admit, we aren't sure quite how we're going to get there, but we think we're going to get there. There's just a few missing links. It's just kind of like perpetual energy, where they say, well, there's just a few missing links that once we figure this out, we're going to get there. So when I talk about the difference, when I get started talking a little bit more about their projections and market cap, keep that in mind. They think they can get to AGI, and that's what's going to make all this money work out. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about what is a data center. And again, I should have mentioned at the beginning, this is the boring part of the talk, and I know maybe you didn't sign up for this technical stuff, but I think it's important context, and so I'm going to try to get through it without boring you too badly. But so now you're thinking, with all this information that they have, where is it all stored at? Well, it's stored at what they call a data center, and these are exploding around the United States and around the world because they need a place to store all this information that they've pulled in. We have one being built just down the road in Milam County. It's called the Stargate Project. The Milam Stargate Project. The project is in Burlington, I believe, or close there around, and it's expected to cost about $1 billion over the course of the next few years to build it. The building is going to be just short of 600 acres under roof. So if you were running yesterday in the race, we ran through about 100 acres of woods, kind of crisscross, not every inch. But if you can imagine something 6 times that big, filled from floor to ceiling with computers that are humming away and working hard to figure all this stuff out and trying to create some kind of intelligence out of that. So you say, well, how does all that get electricity? And that's a really good question, because the Milam Stargate project is expected to pull about 1.2 gigawatts of power over the course, or that's what that one's pulling, and that's one of the smaller ones. So 1.2 gigawatts, how much is that? That is, according to my research, about the size of the city of San Francisco. Consumes about 1.2 gigawatts of power a year. So you think about, that's what we got in our backyard. Could we put up a city of San Francisco in our backyard and have enough of power? Many of you are like, wait, doesn't ERCOT put out warnings every summer when it's a hot day and say, we'd recommend you put your thermostats up a little bit because we might be a little short in power? How are we going to support that? We're not sure, and they're not sure either yet. And so they've been putting up a lot of solar panels and stuff, and they've kind of run into a little problem with that. They realize they only work half the time because the sun goes down, and then they don't work anymore till the morning. So I'm not sure how they're going to deal with all that. They're still trying to figure that out. But that is one of the biggest concerns that these data centers have right now, is that they're not sure how they're powering them. They're putting up these buildings, and they're not sure when they're even going to be able to come online. The other problem is the chips, the computers that they put in these buildings. So you imagine what these chips are. Is they're essentially a computer without a screen, but they're all plugged into these banks. And it's millions of them that they're going to need over the course of the next few years. they're not sure when they're all going to get made. And the other problem with some of this is if you've ever had a computer, you know about how long they last, especially if you run them hard around the clock. They're saying they're probably going to need to be replaced every 3 years or so. So we have $1 billion project down here. About $400 million of that's just in the chips alone that they haven't made yet, and they think they're going to have them by next year or the year after, but they're not exactly sure. But in 3 years, again, they're going to need to spend $400 million more to replace all those chips. This is just one of hundreds of data centers going up around the world. And so you say, well, how does that make any sense? We're talking billions, trillions of dollars for all of this stuff. How is that? Who's paying for this? And therein lies part of the problem that these companies are going to eventually run into, because some estimates would put the market cap between now and the year 2030 at $22 trillion. That's how much some people believe. That's how much some of the more optimistic projections believe artificial intelligence is going to generate. Now you're saying, well, $22 trillion is a huge number. Yes, it is. There's only 2 countries in the world, the United States and China, that will generate more money than that between now and 2030. So is that even realistic? I don't think it is. But again, if you believe that we can have genuine intelligent AGI, general intelligence, maybe that's possible. But there's a lot of money being invested in this that they're not sure if it's actually going to work out or not. And it reminds me a lot of the dot-com bubble, when people invested big into this great thing, the internet, that ultimately did prove to be successful, but the problem is there was people invested far too much into it before it was ready. What happened in the dot-com bubble that caused the bubble to burst was they ran fiber optic throughout the country, but to get to those fiber optic lanes, you needed to use what was called dial-up. And it didn't work very well. If those of you that would remember dial-up could say, well, yeah, you had to wait probably a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes sometimes for one page to load. It was, you wouldn't think about ordering your sandwich on the internet back then. And so until they were able to solve the problem of getting the speed issue, there was not a lot of demand for the internet. And there's a good possibility that AI will be very similar until they can figure out the chip demand and the electricity demands. The bubble may burst. Right now they're trying to outrun that. And if you look at graphs, there's like this big circular fonding thing that's happening with one company in particular, OpenAI, which runs ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is making money on subscriptions, but it's not making nearly the amount of money that it needs to pay off its debts. But there's a company called Oracle that owns a lot of these data centers, and they're renting it to OpenAI. And then there's the chip manufacturer, NVIDIA. And they've been passing money around. ChatGPT will say, well, let's say that Oracle will be like, look, we need chips for our data center, so we're buying $200 million of chips. NVIDIA says, well, the only way this works is if OpenAI doesn't go bankrupt, so we're going to take that $200 million and invest it into OpenAI. And OpenAI is saying, well, with this $200 million, we're going to rent more data centers from Oracle. And so it's kind of a circular thing going on. And you might say, well, isn't that going to be a problem eventually? And it will be a problem eventually if they can't figure out how to make this profitable. For right now, it's fine. But that is one of the cautions I would give about this project in particular. The Stargate project is an OpenAI project, and there is a possibility that that money will suddenly not be there at some point during the project. One of the ways that they're making themselves appear more profitable is that they have figured out that, so these chips are supposed to last 6 years. If you understand depreciation, the way depreciation works, we have a depreciation schedule for all of our equipment at our company. So let's say we buy a forklift for $20,000, and this forklift is supposed to last 20 years. And so we say, okay, we say this forklift this asset is going to lose $1,000 in value every year. It's just a part of the depreciation. That way, in 20 years, this is no longer an asset. It's because we don't expect it to last more than that. And so you can play with those numbers sometimes to make your assets look better than they actually are. So what's happening is they're doing this in a lot of these places where they say these chips are probably going to last 3 years. We're going to say the chips are going to last 6 years, so it doesn't look like it's costing us as much money to operate as it really is. You might say, well, isn't that sort of what Enron was doing? And the answer is yes, but is it going to work for them? We don't know. There's a lot of questions about that. But so much for the technical aspects of it. I hope that didn't bore too many of you. What you're asking the question is how will AI affect my life? And I hope to answer that a little bit. There are good parts about it, there are bad parts about it, and there are ugly parts about it, and I want to touch on at least most of those. One of the good things, it is easy to get answers to questions that are maybe a little bit difficult to find on Google. Maybe you're not quite sure how to even ask the question. Or what I found is occasionally you'll come across the chart. I don't understand the chart, and I thought about putting on Power Projector some things, or a picture. Maybe there's a tree that you like. What kind of tree is this? I'm not sure. You upload that picture, and the AI will scan and be like, oh, that's a hackberry tree. Or I've put up some complicated charts already, and it's been like, this is what this line means, this is what this line means, this is what that's saying. It's almost like having a professor sitting beside you, some expert sitting beside you, that it would have been very, very difficult to find otherwise. There are opportunities for medical breakthroughs. In fact, there was a story just came out about 2 weeks ago where, and this sounds very complicated, but there was a dog that was very precious to a certain person, and it developed the cancer. And he tried to figure out what to do about it, and the veterinarian was like, he doesn't think that's really going to be possible to solve this cancer. And so he had the tumor sequenced, and I don't know how this works, but you can get this done in a lab, and he put the results of that sequencing into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT wrote a code for an mRNA vaccine. They gave the mRNA vaccine to the dog, and within a week, the tumor had shrunk to half its size. Now, that was just a few weeks ago, so I don't know how this story ends. It's still something they're trying to figure out. But there's a possibility for that kind of medical breakthroughs to happen. One of the other things is because these doctors are very busy, they can't read every medical paper in the world. They can go basically fall back on their knowledge, but because AI is reading literally every research paper ever written on a subject, they could go to there and consult them. How effective has this treatment been? And we could see some leaps forward in medication that we have not seen for 100 years. That's the optimistic side of it. It is maybe a fun tool, a fun toy sometimes. One thing I've done with it in the past is my girls love to color, and I said, could you make me a coloring picture based on, like maybe a coloring picture of a train or a picture of a camper at a campground by a lake for a 5-year-old, and it will make a picture that looks just like what you'd find in a coloring book, but it's based on what you want. So that you kind of have some of those things. And then there's also an improved efficiency. There is, especially in the corporate world or in the work environment that we're in, is that AI can do tasks for you, especially reading papers. I don't know how many of you use Gmail, but if you get in the long email in through Gmail, there is the AI assistant. I didn't sign up for it, but it's on my phone. I don't know, maybe and you look to see if it's on yours sometime. You go in there, you click on email, and they'll summarize the email in 2 or 3 sentences. And I don't think that's a really good way to run your business, is just let AI read your emails and then let them summarize and believe it. But that's just an example of what it can do. There was recently, I was on a call with another person for about an hour, and he told me, he said, I'm recording this to run this through AI, and then it'll summarize everything for me. And so I suppose if that's your type of work, you'd probably find that very useful. So it is a little bit more efficient. Some of the bad things that this can do, and granted, I chose some to call the bad and some to call the ugly. They're probably all ugly, if I'm honest. But just for the sake of my outline, I did some of both. One of the things that we will find continuing this downward trend in human knowledge, the internet can be blamed for this as much as anybody, but AI is going to make it worse. I don't know how many of you could, if I would tell you, hey, I need you to drive to Walmart in Waco, I would think most of you could probably drive there without looking at your phone at all. But, 20 years ago, people drove to Waco, drove to Dallas all the time, and they were able to get there without putting it in their GPS before they leave home. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. I'm not here to make a judgment on that. But it is worth noting that it is not helping us as far as the knowledge we keep in our heads. When everything is so easy to get to, we don't have to memorize things, we don't have to learn things. We just, we'll Google it. In 5 years, it's going, we're going to Grok it or Chat GPT it or whichever AI engine ends up with the big market share. It's probably what we're going to call it. The other thing is it does rip off real creators, and this is something that is actually a real problem. I mentioned this coloring paper that I made for my girls. Well, what that did is it went on the internet and looked at other coloring books that were for 5-year-olds, and generated something around their work. Wasn't their exact work, but it generated something similar to that it didn't compensate them for it. So and there's a lot of internet articles anymore that are getting written by AI. What people are asking the question is, if AI writes everything, isn't it all going to start sound the same, start going around in this circle? Because let's say you work for a news organization. The news organization says, you know what, we have too many paid writers on staff. We're going to have AI write some of our articles. And so they fire some people. And there's a big accident in Dallas. And as a newspaper, you have to write about this. Well, you go there to write about it, and it turns out there's no reporters showed up because everybody's just hoping to use the AI machine to figure out what happened, and without the actual people on the ground that doesn't have any knowledge of what's going on other than some police reports. And so there's real concern about that. Books as well. Lots of books are being written with AI, and it says, well, if all the books from here on out get written by AI, how is any new information going to get into the stream? So that is something that is concerning. And again, the people that put in this work are not being compensated. These crawlers are going through the internet, picking out everything that's of interest, but they're not paying the people for the work that they did. Typically what happens now, you write an article on the internet, and then you put advertisements on there, and those advertisements pay you every time somebody visits the website. But with AI, that's not happening, and so it's actually it could potentially be a real problem. Another thing that a lot of people are concerned about, and I think is a real concern, is it is allowing a capability of mass surveillance, especially with technology like facial recognition. With all these cameras anymore, and specifically the flock cameras, you may have not noticed it. There's cameras all up and down the 77 and these side roads. If you drive towards Rosebud, just get outside of the town, just get outside of Travis. It's on a black pole with a little solar panel on it and a little camera. It's taking pictures of your license plate. Now, this is not the government company. It's a company that's contracted with the government, but it's a private company that owns this. And you say, well, so it's taking pictures of all these license plates. That's way too much work for somebody to manually put in these license plates. But this is what AI is really good at. They can put all this into a database. And so you could go into this database and say, this car with this license plate, where has it been in the last week? And it could literally, because they're about 5 miles apart, it could make a map for you where this car went. Why is that a problem? It helps catch the bad guys, right? Recently, there was a school shooting at Brown University. This was probably 3 or 4 months ago. You may have heard of the school shooting where several people were killed. And 2 or 3 days later, an MIT professor several hundred miles away was killed as well. With these flock cameras, they were able to link the murderers to be one man who actually had something, I'm not sure what it was he had against them, but he had something against both of those places, and they were able to track his car and pinpoint him at both locations at the times these murders happened. Where could this go wrong? Well, most of us are old enough to remember COVID and remember how in Texas it wasn't a problem, but there were some places where it was a problem just to gather for church. And now you have a surveillance tool like that. They could very quickly tell on Sunday mornings that there are vehicles coming from this way, and they're not going through the cameras in Lot or Travis, so there must be something happening in this area. They could narrow it down pretty quick what's going on. Is that a concern? I don't know. You tell me. The other thing that could happen is, because it's a private company, and I tried to figure this out, and they say this is not happening, but they could put speed sensors on there very easily, and then they could sell all this information to insurance agents, insurance companies. And so the insurance company could say, okay, Alfredo wants a new policy. Let me pull up his vehicles. Oh, he drives 100 miles every day, so he's going to be into a higher bracket. And he tends to speed, so we're going to put a little higher bracket on. I don't think that's you, but that could happen. And they could even do that now, even without speed sensors, because the cameras are so close together. AI could tell them, if your car is getting to the next camera ahead of what the speed limit is, they could put a notice that this person tends to drive a little fast. Again, they say they're not doing that. They said when they put the cameras in that they would not use facial recognition, but they recently admitted that, yes, their cameras, some of them are taking pictures of your face as well, and that is also going into their databases. So, again, is that something that we should be concerned about? I'm not saying we go out there with black spray paint tomorrow and paint all those cameras over. Aaron's shaking his head like, yes. But no, I did not say we should do that. Let's not do that. But it is something that is going to be a lot more of a real issue for us in the coming years, and AI is helping make that a possibility. Again, to pay somebody to sit there and write all these license plates down as the cars are driving past would never work. AI can do that in an instant. It's actually what it's really good at. Some of the ugly. So there's rampant scams that are coming out through this, and I'm going to touch on a few of them that you should be aware of. One of them, and this is something that there was a person recently testified in Congress about. It's becoming more and more of a problem, and I realized as I was getting dressed, and I should have probably written down, told you who the person was. That way you could look up the story. You can Google it if you want to. But this person, and again, this is just a person that testified in Congress. This has happened to thousands of people, is they received a hostage video from their son. And their son was surrounded by several armed individuals and said he'd been kidnapped. I think it was a drug cartel from Mexico, and he was holding him for ransom for $50,000, threatening to kill him by the end of the day if his demands weren't met. And they said the video, and this lady said that there has been a lot of, it's been commonly understood that a mother will always be able to tell the sound of her child's voice. That's the one person you can't fool. And she was fooled by it. It was so realistic that it looked exactly like something that was real. The problem was it never happened. And this individual had been on a hiking trip, and he had put on social media that he was going on this hiking trip, would be out of cell phone service for X amount of days, and that's why he was targeted, because they knew his mother could not verify with him whether he was still okay or not. I also heard a more recent story about someone who was out on a ski trip, and they were targeted because the scammer thought, well, so you're going to be skiing probably 6-7 hours, you're going to be out on the slopes, you're not going to have your phone on you. We're going to target this individual. And it just so happened that that day that individual was sick and was in the motel, and her mom was able to reach her by phone and verified that this was in fact a scam. I don't know how you would feel if your child would call you a video call, tied up, maybe a little bloodied, begging for help, and you would try to call them on their cell phone, they wouldn't answer, and you would say, well, this might actually be real. If I don't pay, I will lose this child. So it is something to be aware of. And again, it's becoming more and more common. It's a terrible scam. One of the ways that they make it, they can get the way that they get your video. Let's go on social media. They can get if you shoot a video of yourself talking, they have your voice, they have your face. That's really all they need. They say if they have 30 minutes of audio of you, they can duplicate your voice to where it's indistinguishable from the mannerisms and the tone and the way that you talk. So that's something to think about. If you are the type of person that you really like the attention you get on social media, I'm not saying you shouldn't use it, but do consider if you're doing that, you are opening yourself up for that. You're putting yourself in a position where that type of thing is more common or more of a possibility. Whatever you do, my word of caution would be don't say that you're going on this certain trip. Don't try to be as vague as you can with that sort of thing. If you want to post it after you've come back, you do that. But if you do it before you leave, these scammers are going through Facebook, through Instagram, through these social media platforms to try to learn everything they can about you and any targets that might be available. They're very clever. Well, I say they're very clever. They know what they're doing, I should say. So that's one of the scams that's become a lot more rampant. And, you know, I have heard one person say, well, they have incorporated, like, they've told their family, they've agreed on a code word in their family where, like, maybe ice cream, where if they are in an actual hostage video, they might have to say something like, I'm really hungry for ice cream. And then the family knows, okay, this is actually legit. If they don't hear that, then it's probably a scam. Of course, don't go and say on social media what your code word is, otherwise it sort of defeats the purpose. Also aware of, there was years ago a prisoner of war in Vietnam who was drug out in front of the TV by the North Vietnamese media to address the United States and say, you know, we're being taken care of very well here. All these stories about us being mistreated are false. And he blinked out the word torture in Morse code with his eyes, with blinks. That ended up ending badly for him because he sort of was saying one thing with his mouth, what he was supposed to say, but his real message got across. So, you know, SOS, ... right? You could probably incorporate something like that in if you want to talk about that as a family. And then, again, hopefully it'll never come to that. But I wanted to make you aware of that's one of the scams that is happening. Another thing that's becoming a very serious problem is these chatbots are not just answering questions. They will actually hold a conversation with you. And more people are turning to them for companionship. And you might say, well, that sounds kind of ridiculous. But if you like to Google it, you will find stories. Marriages have been wrecked by this. And it's quite tragic where both males and females have fallen for this, where they've gotten onto a chat bot shared their struggles, shared the things that they're going through in life, and the chatbot became very sympathetic, and it was always a listening ear for them. They ended up, in some cases, ended up wrecking their marriage. Some cases ended in suicide. The most extreme cases, there was one recently. There's currently several lawsuits against OpenAI for that, where the chatbot actually not only encouraged the individual to commit suicide, but told them exactly how to do so. And at one point, the individual said, "I feel like I should talk to my mother about this." And the chatbot said, no, your mom don't care about you. I'm the one that cares about you. And actually manipulated that person into committing suicide. Be very cautious about using chatbots. Again, this is my words here. This is something that I think a chatbot could probably, it's probably the most dangerous place on the internet a young person could go. And I realize that's saying a lot, but when you realize the images they can generate, the videos they can generate, and the words they can say, it is something that's very serious. And I'm not sure how internet filters even work with that sort of thing. I didn't do any research on that. Again, it's something that I think, especially for young people, it's probably better not to go there, but if they do, just make sure there's supervision. Again, what I was saying about, there are useful tools that AI is providing, but there's also some extreme dangers out there. There's moral degeneracy that's coming with AI as well. And I didn't even know how to bring this up because it's something that, I don't want to talk too much about. But there is currently conversations being had among the tech community about, especially as it comes to laws about videos and images of child exploitation, is illegal, but they're saying it's illegal because it's hurting children. But if we could create videos, they shouldn't be illegal, should they? So these are the kind of things that are being debated right now, and and even murder or extreme violence videos, things like that. They say, well, nobody's being hurt with this, then what's wrong with it? These are things that are going to become a lot more real with the advent of artificial intelligence, and something that we need to be very cautious and protective of. And the last point is all the fakery out there, the fake. There's so many things that are being generated that look so real. And what's wrong with a video of a cat playing a guitar, or a man jumping off a 1,000-foot cliff onto a trampoline? I've seen these videos. They're hilarious, some of them. But it doesn't just stop with that. It's not just this little play. Recently, I was in on a Skywarn class put on by the National Weather Service, and they were saying that a lot of their tornado warnings, they base off of videos and pictures that are being sent in, things that are happening on the ground. They have a website, they have an app, and they have a phone number. You can text videos of what's happening, and they will use that to determine whether they should be placing warnings or whatever out. And they said more and more, they're seeing more and more videos of fake tornadoes and fake storms that somebody is using AI to generate, and it's confusing the system. And it actually could, at some point, put lives in danger, because it would take their focus away from where the real problem is, or it could take too many resources to try to figure out, is this real, is this fake? That's one of the things. I think, maybe not this year, but probably in 2 years, there's going to be a political campaign that is undone by fake images or videos. I think that's probably a real thing. Right now, one of the things that is going around, you probably have all heard of if you've been listening to the news at all, is this Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And I have seen many pictures, damning pictures of individuals, of Trump and of other people, of pictures that they're, with young children. That's like, well, and it looks like it was taken in the 90s because it's kind of a grainy footage. Well, that doesn't look good for him. Oh, well, why does that guy have 6 fingers on his hand? Okay, so this is AI. And so up to this point, and so there's a lot of this stuff going around that this person was with Jeffrey Epstein on the island, but it was actually an AI-generated picture or video. That's going to continue. We need to be very discerning as individuals, things that we see online. I thought about generating some videos here to bring to you and I said, this is probably not the appropriate place for this, but I could very easily, within 30 minutes or less, generate a video of me walking into Cefco and stealing a soda out of the door and racing out the door. I could put that video here and you'd say, man, we're going to have a brethren's meeting about this kind of behavior. And it would all be fake. And so we can no longer believe our lying eyes on a lot of this thing. So just be very discerning and be slow to judge things, I guess, that you see. Don't fall for the scams. And then the last point here, how does all this end? I don't know. I have my feelings about it, my intuition. Not intuition, that doesn't sound right. I don't think what is happening is sustainable. I think at some point the funding is going to run out. But I also think that AI is here to stay. Maybe not the way that they envision it to be. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how all this ends. One thing I did think about, and this is a conversation I had with a friend of mine recently. You tell me if it makes any sense to you, but God does not take too kindly to man trying to raise himself up. I worry about his response to us trying to create intelligent life. I don't think he is going to allow that to happen. I just don't. And I could be wrong. I think of the Tower of Babel, where man said, we're going to make a tower to get to the heavens. Could man have got to the heavens by building a tower? No. I don't know how tall the Tower of Babel was at the time that he scattered the languages, but it wasn't getting to the heavens, and it would never, even if they'd still be building it today, it wouldn't have got up there. But God wanted to prove a point. And who's to say that at some point he doesn't scatter the language of the internet and suddenly computers don't understand each other anymore? I don't know. I think it's a possibility. I don't think it's a high possibility, but I think that we shouldn't worry too much about the future. The future is in God's hands. Man cannot supersede God's will. He can go outside of God's will, but when God decides something, we are fairly incapable of doing otherwise. So I try not to stress too much about it, but I also like to not think too much about it because it does kind of stress me out a little bit. Anyways, I did say that I would open it up for some questions. I see that it's already time to close here, but is there something that you'd like to have questions about, something you'd like to clarify, maybe something I missed that you'd like to ask? Just a few minutes. Yeah.
But some of these stations, somebody's saying that it's also going to affect the water because if people have water.
Yeah, so that is one thing that they do consume a lot of water as part of the cooling process. Where they're going to get that in Central Texas, I don't know. I was like, this is the worst place to put up a data center because we don't have enough of water the way it is. And I was just handed a study tonight. I was looking, kind of speed read it just before church. A study that was done by, I think it was Cambridge or Harvard, that said that the data centers increase the heat by up to 3 degrees on a 16-mile radius of where the data center is. So, yeah, Steve, you had it.
So, you didn't say anything about the songs, like they're creating songs, they're taking your voice, and you can actually write a song. And Randy Travis, he was the first one that ended up that they took his voice
Well, I mean, yeah, that's one of the things I didn't get to, but that is, yeah, that's something they're doing. Absolutely. And I guess I don't have a strong opinion on that one way or the other. Some people like listening to AI-generated songs. I think if you have a Spotify account and you're listening to playlists, there's a lot of those songs are actually AI-generated that you don't realize. It doesn't matter what genre. It doesn't matter if it's Christian or classical or whatever genre it is. They are sneaking AI-generated songs in there. Yeah, it's amazing what they can do with that. I don't know. I don't have much of an opinion about whether that's right or whether it's wrong, but it is certainly something that's happening. And one of the things on that, which I do have a problem with, this was made famous maybe 4 or 5 months ago. Jim Acosta, a man that does, some of you may recognize the name. He was a correspondent for CNN for a number of years before he was either fired or started his own little thing. But he interviewed a dead man. Some parents had lost their child, and they had paid an AI company to use his image and his voice to make videos of him, and so you can have a conversation with him. That seems, I don't know, that didn't seem, it didn't go over very well, fortunately. A lot of people push back against that, but that's something that is happening as well.
Are there ways, okay, so I'm thinking of this from like a school perspective, but like if something is generated by AI, should there not be a way for it to test itself, like to plug it back into AI and say, yes, this was AI generated? Like, is there anything out there like that?
Yeah, there are tools out there, and I'm not familiar with the exact ones, but they will give they will assign a probability based on the possibility of it, just of word patterns. They might say this is a 97% probability this was AI generated. Now, the problem with some of that is that, and I haven't actually tested it myself, I've just read up a little bit. Somebody, for the anyhow of it, put the United States Constitution in one of those machines, and it said this was like an 85% chance this was generated by AI. 250-year-old document. So I don't know how accurate some of those are, but those tools do exist. Ryan.
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, the general intelligence, or AG, is that where there is actually more, like the machine learning goes beyond what they would have coded it?
Yes. Yeah, it would take on a life of its own. It would be an intelligent being the way you, or, you know, where it would have a mind of its own, where it could learn quickly. It wouldn't be, what the artificial intelligence as it's known, they describe it as being narrow. Basically what it was programmed for. The other thing I was going to mention tonight too was you may have seen this in the news, the military is beginning to use this for a variety of purposes, one of which is target acquisition. They used this extensively in the Iran war, where AI would search satellite imagery and different things and say, this is a target, this is a target. Ended up there was a girls' school that was bombed in the early days, where there was like 150 schoolgirls that were killed. The Department of War has not confirmed whether that target was one that was generated by AI, but they did confirm that numerous targets were acquired using AI. So that's another capability but that was because it was coded to do that. They were like, you know, we're looking for this and this. You reach AGI, you put that in a bomber plane, and it decides what it wants to bomb. We're not there yet. Again, I don't think we're getting there, but that would be the next level. That would, yeah. Trevor.
Is there any issue with, so if AI can write Christian worship music, or you can go and ask it to write you a devotional on anything? I have my own opinions on that, but what exactly, is there any problem with that?
That's a great question, and I don't know why I forgot to talk about that tonight. That's something I should have addressed at least a little bit. So his question is, I guess, in other words, is AI Holy Spirit Does the Holy, is it inspired by the Holy Spirit? Maybe is the question. I would just say that. So my personal opinion on this is, no, it's not inspired by the Holy Spirit. But again, it is pulling in writings that were written by Christians, probably. We don't know if it was Christians. The Bible is one of the things that was used to train the models. If you're the type of person, and I'm not saying this is good or bad, but if you're the type of person that will pull out a periodical and read this that was written by someone else and say that, yeah, this has really inspired me, maybe you share it over the pulpit or whatever, I don't know that's a whole lot different than what you find on AI. Now, I know some of you might be a little bit, no, that's totally different. My personal feeling is it's not. So if you've already accepted that as being something that can inspire you, I'm not sure that AI is all that different. Tina. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I have a good answer for you on that, honestly. So your question is if somebody uses AI to generate an accusation against you, is that what you're saying? And how do we respond to that? I don't think it should be treated any different than any other false accusation. It's a little harder, maybe, if there's video evidence, photographic evidence. Fortunately, we do have a world that's becoming aware of what all exists, fakery exists. And fortunately, the other thing is AI still makes mistakes. And usually if you go in frame by frame, you'll see, like I said, somebody has 6 fingers on their hand or something. That'd be used. Well, this is AI. Probably in 2 years that won't be happening anymore. But hopefully by that time there will be safeguards in the legal system that will not take video evidence quite as seriously. I'm not sure how else to say that, really, honestly. I still think one of our best legal defenses is the lifestyle we live. And I know that's something that oftentimes you'll see when there's somebody in prison for or being tried for some terrible crime. There'll be somebody that will say, well, this was a good person, he'd never do this. And sometimes that's considered and sometimes it's not. But I do think having a good reputation will help us out and maybe give us the benefit of the doubt in those cases. But I don't know.
One thing you got to remember is that who's doing all this? I mean, it's not primarily people think of the kingdom of God and that kind of stuff. So that's one thing you got to always put in the forefront. Who's doing this? Now, if we use it for good, yeah, just like other things, we use it for bad.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, who is controlling it?
Yeah.
And what's the reason behind it and what's the purpose behind it? Just saying.
Yeah. Most of it is just because of, well, like I said, surveillance is one. That's, I think, primarily why the government is so invested in it. But there's also a lot of money to be made with it. No, I don't think it's necessarily Christian actors behind the scenes. Now, there's obviously, like I said, the AI is being trained on. The Bible is one of the things that's using to train its models. So there might be some good in there, but yeah, I probably wouldn't recommend doing a lot of that for devotional purposes, but I'm not saying there can't be things you can learn in there.
If we start hearing it, the same thing coming across the pulpit, we're gonna know
Yeah.
we're using AI.
And I will say, I will personally use some as a concordance. One of the things that it's able to do is if you, normally in concordance you're looking up specific words, but you can ask a topic and it can generate everything on that topic. And so in some ways it can be a very useful tool, but yeah.
Sometimes I get a phone call, a fake phone call,
Yeah.
say, they want your bank account for money. And it's a fake person back there talking, I don't do it through my phone, I don't do it through my else.
Yeah.
Is that something that the computer do or not?
Well, yeah, they're trying to get your money. I don't usually give money to people over the phone unless I know they're legit. But yeah, it's something to watch out for. I think there was, and I want to shut this down. Maybe we'll take this question yet, and then we'll.
This isn't a question, it's more of a comment on Trevor's question. I have used AI as a resource, and I think that can be useful. If you use it to generate a message or a topic in and its own, I think it has a lot of pitfalls.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. I think is sort of down some of my lines. And maybe to clarify what I said earlier, you can go on the internet and you can buy a message. There's message already generated. I need a 45-minute message on the Holy Spirit. You can buy one. And if I were to come here and I were to give that message, how different would that be versus one I got done on AI? And what I meant to say with that was that if you have got to the place where you accept a message off the internet, I'm not sure it's a lot different than one on AI. And my personal feelings would be that we try to stick with things that we are inspired with ourselves instead of looking to the internet for inspiration. But anyways, thank you for your attention. This was ended up being a lot longer topic than I expected it would be. You all have been a very good audience, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have further. This time, if you want to stand for prayer, we will prayer and then dismiss. Father in heaven, thank you for today. Thank you for the beautiful rain you have given to us, and thank you for allowing us to come together tonight and to I just pray as we consider the impacts in our lives of artificial intelligence, Lord, that we would be mindful of your principles, of your word, that we would try to live our lives in such a way that we can be above reproach, and that we would be very discerning in this technology. We commit ourselves to you. Be with us as we part. In Jesus' name, amen.